Hello everyone and welcome back to another review here at the Graphic Library. Today I'll be reviewing Green Lantern by Geoff Johns, Volume 1, and this is Volume 1 of 3. So first of all, we'll talk about what's in this book, so the content. Then we'll spend a bit of time catching everyone up with the sort of history of Green Lantern and where we are now, because that's sort of really important for the jumping off point in this book. After that, we'll get into characters as well as minor stories, and then we'll talk about the grand overarching narrative. We'll finish off with some cool moments in the book, as well as talking a bit about the art. So first in this book, we have Green Lantern Rebirth, issues 1 to 6. And then we have Green Lantern Corps Recharge, 1 to 5. And then we jump into the main Green Lantern run, which is issues 1 to 25. Then we have Green Lantern Corps 14 to 18, and we'll talk about that in a bit, as well as some other stuff. But yeah, we'll mainly talk about the main Green Lantern run, as well as where the Green Lantern Corps issues fit in. Okay, so first, let's talk about who Green Lantern is. So I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with the concept of Green Lantern. Now, Green Lantern is not a individual person, it's more a mantle. So the Green Lantern Corps, the Green Lantern Force, are basically space cops. And they all have a green ring, which is powered by willpower, which lets them form energy constructs. One of the most famous Green Lanterns is Hal Jordan, which is who this book focuses on, but there are a few others from Earth, and we'll get into that as well. So Hal Jordan was a fighter pilot. While he was flying one day, he saw an alien spaceship crash. He saw somebody in there, Abin Sur. Abin Sur was dying, and he was like, "Oh, look, mate, do you want to become Green Lantern?" Hal Jordan, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And he became Green Lantern, and that's sort of the origin point. Now, in the 90s, so Hal Jordan has been out of commission in comics at this point for quite a while. In the 90s, Hal Jordan finished up because he went crazy, he went power hungry, and he turned evil and destroyed the Green Lantern Corps. So this happened in the 90s. He called himself Parallax, and basically he turned into a bad guy, and he hasn't really been on the scene since then, and neither have the Green Lanterns, interestingly enough. So as I said before, Green Lanterns are space cops, so there's more than one of them. There seems to be quite a few that come from Earth for various reasons. So Hal Jordan is, of course, the first, and there's another two that come up. So there's Guy Gardner, and there's John Stewart. Some of you may recognize John Stewart as the Green Lantern from the Justice League animated series. He sort of popularized the character. Anyway, so those are two Earth Green Lanterns as well. At this point, they still have their rings, but the Green Lantern Corps is, as I said, disbanded, and they're not that active. There's one more Earth Green Lantern that I want to talk about. And I know there are a lot of names here and lots going on, and it's hard because they're all the same person with the same powers. But we'll get into that later. So after the fall of Hal Jordan and the destruction of the Corps, there is one last Green Lantern, and this is a sort of individual, self-operating Green Lantern. He's not part of the Corps. His name is Kyle Rayner. He joins the Justice League in 1994, I think. Grant Morrison's run, 1996 maybe. So he's never been part of the Corps. He's never experienced that. He's just operating on Earth by himself. And this book opens with Kyle Rayner crash landing onto Earth with some sort of message and some sort of cargo. And that's where we get the introduction of two more characters. Please bear with me. We're nearly there. And this is what it feels like when you start reading the book. It's a lot of, just catching up, because Geoff Johns, the writer of this book, obviously, he wanted to do something big. He wanted to do something great with Hal Jordan and the Green Lanterns. But at this point in time, Hal Jordan and the Green Lanterns are non-existent. So he has to do a lot of work setting the scene so that people understand what's come before. So it's very narrative heavy at the beginning. And he also has to do a lot of work resetting the scene, even playing field, so that he can start where he wants to and not really where things left off. Yeah, but that's not to say it's uninteresting. It's just very sort of in your face to start. So the two additional characters on the scene are Ganthet, who is a guardian. He's a little blue dude, and the guardians are basically that they created and they oversee the Green Lantern Corps. So they are non-existent at the moment, as well as the Corps, except for Ganthet, and he's operating independently. And you also have Kilowog, who's a veteran Green Lantern. He trains all the Green Lanterns, all the rookies as they come in. Very big, strong, alien-looking dude. Yeah. So they also come onto the scene. So right now on Earth, you have the 3 Green Lanterns, Kilowog and Ganthet. And okay, all right. This is if you thought all that was a bit dense, we're about to get into Hal Jordan. Okay, so where Hal Jordan left off, he descended into madness, turned crazy, and destroyed the Green Lantern Corps. So he's been wandering around for a while, and Geoff Johns actually rewrites it. He retcons that story so that he didn't actually go crazy, but he was infested by a alien parasite that was influencing his decision. Yeah, I know, it's all great, very plausible. And it's not just thrown in there, it's built off later. To Geoff Johns' credit, it makes incredible sense the way he takes it. But yeah, so right now, Hal Jordan is possessed by this space entity, and he's at the same time possessed by the Spectre, who is, and I want to get this right, who is the living embodiment of God's wrath on Earth. Comics, nice and simple. So, yeah, the Spectre basically goes around enacting judgment on people who are deserving of judgment. So right now, Hal Jordan is possessed by these 2 separate entities, and they're sort of fighting for, control over him. Interestingly, in this, you get some really fun, really cool body horror stuff. It's just slight, but just sort of an expression of that possession and regaining of control. I think that's really cool, and eventually, the Spectre is dismissed from Hal Jordan, and also Parallax is exorcised from him. But Parallax ends up infecting someone else, right? And you're basically left with the 5 Green Lanterns on Earth, so the 4 Earth Green Lanterns plus Kilowog, who have to defeat this space parasite. And this is sort of the big capstone of the Rebirth series, so the first 6 chapters. And that's why you can, Rebirth is a very fitting name for it, because as I said before, it's sort of Geoff Johns re-establishing the lore of the character. So yeah, what's really interesting, and I think this is, with Green Lantern books, this is make or break, since they're all the same character, since they all have the same powers, it can be very uninteresting if you have more than one, and you have to do it really well. The way that Geoff Johns writes this, and also a credit to the various illustrators, the artists on this book, it's really narratively and visually interesting, because each of the Green Lanterns are their own character with their own arcs, but they also use their Green Lantern rings their own way, again in story and visually. So for example, John Stewart is an architect, and the way that he creates his constructs is he builds them from the inside out, very stable. Guy Gardner, on the other hand, has a lot of power, very explosive power, and is less precise. And you can see that, his power, I think his power can't wait to sort of jump free from him. Kyle Rayner, the youngest of the Green Lanterns, is actually an artist by trade, and he is constantly designing and redesigning his constructs. And you can see him doing that. Kilowog is just raw, intense power, and it's said that when he uses the ring, that's the only ring in existence that actually makes a sound, because it's actually so much of his willpower being channeled. And I just appreciate how they use their rings differently, because they're different characters, and it's very visually and narratively interesting to see that, where other writers and artists could fall into the sort of trap of it being very mundane and boring. And as I said before, you can visually see just small things of the way that their rings are different. So that is the rebirth story, and I know that was pretty dense, so thanks for staying with us, but it's sort of important to, as I said before, level the playing field so that we can start building something new. And that's exactly what the new series does, and that's the Green Lantern Corps Recharge series 1 to 5. So what this is it takes place in space on Oa, which is the homeworld of the Green Lanterns, and it is the rebuilding and reestablishing of the entire Green Lantern Corps. So the Guardians are back, these little angry Smurfs. They oversee the Green Lantern Corps entirely, and as the book goes on and as the entire story goes on across the other books as well, you really learn to dislike a lot of what they do. What an interesting part of this series is obviously the Corps was decimated and destroyed earlier on. So new rings have to go out to seek potential users, to seek potential Green Lanterns. And basically the only criteria that they have to meet is somebody who has the ability to overcome great fear because of their willpower. So you see an assortment, an accruement of different species, different aliens from across the galaxy come together into the Green Lantern Corps and start to rebuild. And I think this is a really interesting series, and this is actually also where the series splits off. So Green Lantern Rebirth and Green Lantern Corps Recharge form the beginning of this book, but then after that it splits into Green Lantern, which is what we have in here, that 1 to 25, written by Geoff Johns, and then you also have Green Lantern Corps, which is a separate book, separate stories that happen at the same time. And later on, there's a big event that involves both of them, and that's why we have those Green Lantern Corps issues. I think it's 14 to 18 in here, just as a lead up to that big event. Unfortunately, I haven't read Green Lantern Corps. That being said, having only read this, you don't need those Green Lantern Corps issues for it to make sense. Yeah, I think it's entirely feasible and enjoyable to read this just on its own. Sometimes you have these characters coming in and, they've gone on adventures, people end up in different places, somebody dies, and they mention it, and you're like, okay, I guess that must have happened. So you need to be on your toes a little bit, but this book is still enjoyable and very easy to read just on its own. So after the rebuilding of the Green Lantern Corps, you get more grander stories on Earth. Okay, so Hal Jordan, as I said before, airplane pilot, a fighter jet pilot. So he goes back to the airfields and tries to get another job there because he's been out of commission for a while, obviously. I should mention the thing that drove him crazy in the first place was the destruction of Coast City, which is where he lived and the city he sort of protected. So that was basically completely wiped out, millions dead. Understandable, you get a bit mad from that. But so that's what drove him crazy. And in the time since he's gone, the city has started to be rebuilt, but nobody's really moving in because, why would you? So we're back on Earth. But of course, there's some space shenanigans going on, aliens, robots, whatnot. And when that happens, Green Lantern's the one who gets the call and he deals with them. Some pretty interesting stuff. And it's pretty cool because even though these are smaller stories, some of them link to a larger narrative, but you're not sure which one, so it's sort of revealed along as you go. So I think that's a good way to tell these grounded stories, but also still contribute to the larger narrative being told. You get a cool team up with Batman, and you do get different superheroes and that sort of thing popping up, which is great. You also get this really cool story, which is revealed throughout this book. So one thing about Hal Jordan is that when he's flying his fighter jet, he doesn't actually have his ring on him. And when he tells people this, they're like, man, what are you doing? That's the dumbest thing I ever heard, And he's like, no, it's about the thrill. You wouldn't get it, What if I crash? And then he crashes. Him and 2 other pilots are shot down and are taken hostage, prisoners of war, I think, actually, and are, imprisoned, beaten, tortured for a couple of days. And he's kicking himself this whole time because he doesn't have his ring. But then him and the others will have to find a way to escape. So I think that's a pretty cool story, and you see how that sort of psychological effects of that. And, does he fly with his ring afterwards? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I've forgotten. But that is a nice story. And then we leave Earth for a little bit again, and we go back up into space. So Hal Jordan is still, feeling the consequences of his prior actions. So when he was actually when he turned and when he went crazy, he actually did supposedly kill a few Green Lanterns, right? And this is something that is known by the Corps. It's known by the veterans who are still there, and people get talking, and sort of the newbies know this as well. And Hal Jordan, after killing Green Lanterns, is still somehow allowed to be part of the Corps, and this causes a lot of sort of friction and factions forming within the newly formed Green Lantern Corps, which I think is a really interesting story to see. The approaches that different groups take. Who sides with Hal Jordan, who doesn't? How does Hal Jordan feel about this? And then what I think complicates the story more is, turns out these Green Lanterns weren't actually killed, but they were captured, and they've been held prisoner, someplace all this time. Hal Jordan hears about this, and driven by either heroics or guilt, he goes to save them. He manages to free them, but obviously they're not too happy to see him. They have a bit of a punch on, and we see interesting places where they go after that. Now, the main villain of the story is Sinestro. He's a very well-known Green Lantern villain. He wields a yellow powering. He himself used to be a Green Lantern, but he's sort of dissented from the Green Lantern Corps ranks. He was also a very close friend and mentor of Hal Jordan, so they have that sort of personal history there. As I said before, Sinestro has a yellow powering, which is powered by fear. Okay, so Green Lanterns, theirs are powered by willpower. Sinestro's is powered by fear. So Sinestro's been a Green Lantern villain for decades, and traditionally, him and his yellow powering are an anomaly. They're a one-off. Green Lanterns have this whole corps with thousands of members. Sinestro is the only one with a yellow powering. So what Geoff Johns does is he takes this history and he actually expands it into something new. And he does this for a few different things, which we'll continue to look at. But here in this cosmic saga that Geoff Johns is building, a Yellow Lantern Corps, a Sinestro Corps, starts to build, starts to go into recruitment. So no longer is Sinestro just a negative reflection of Hal Jordan, but now the Green Lantern Corps itself has a negative reflection in the Sinestro Corps, which is this Yellow Lantern Corps powered by fear. They're chosen in their ability to instill great fear in others. And eventually you get this massive what is essentially an army of Yellow Lanterns, and this serves as the main plot point for the conflict in this book. It's this massive scale cosmic war between the Green and Yellow Lanterns. You have the war taking place on Oa, which, as we recall, is the home world and the sort of headquarters of the Green Lanterns. You also have the war come to Mogo. Now, Mogo is a living planet, a sentient planet, who is himself a Green Lantern. And he might be one of my favorite Green Lanterns, just this giant planet with a ring on its core. So the Yellow Lanterns bring a sentient planet of their own, because there are just plenty of those floating about. And attack Oa. They attack Mogo, the living planet. And they also end up, of course, at Earth. So you have the Green Lanterns spread pretty thin across these three destinations. And you get these amazing sort of splash pages. Just of total chaos and warfare. So that's the setting of the stage for the Sinestro Corps War, which is what this war is called. It's really brutal. It's huge. Lots of killing, lots of interesting stories and threads that we follow. So if you recall, the Green Lantern Corps issues, that series, the Green Lantern Corps, which isn't in here, remember, it actually follows a few of the other Earth Green Lanterns, as well as a few of the new recruits, through various missions and that sort of thing. And obviously this war picks up on some of those threads, but it's not done in a confusing way, where if you haven't read those issues, it doesn't make sense. As I was saying earlier, you sort of just have to go with the flow. But it's good to see, more interaction between the Green Lantern Corps rather than this being limited just to Hal Jordan. who is of course still a massive player in this. Some other cool moments, I think, early on, so in the Rebirth mini at the beginning, Green Arrow ends up wielding a Green Lantern ring. He manages to manifest one arrow, and it takes everything out of him. And he's talking to Carl Rayner after that. And yeah, he's surprised by the amount of power, the amount of willpower one needs to create anything with the ring. And it just completely destroys him. So I think, the Green Lantern ring is often referred to as, the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. But it's also, it's nice to see, not just anyone can use this, and definitely not use it well. You see, of course, who doesn't love Batman? You see Batman wielding a Green Lantern ring. You also get the return of Star Sapphire, who, is a persona where Carol Ferris, who is the ex-lover, on-again, off-again girlfriend of Hal Jordan, she gets possessed by this alien stone and becomes Star Sapphire, right? So that's historically, you get the return of that in these pages. And again, similar to Sinestro, Geoff Johns takes this one-off transformation and actually starts to build something around it. And you get the beginnings of, there's a Green Lantern Corps, there's a Yellow Lantern Corps. This is actually the beginning of the Violet Lanterns, right? And you see, there's this great picture of, 3 lanterns set up on pedestals with space for, I think it's 4 more. And I think that's really an enticing way of showing that, okay, the Yellow Lantern War, the Sinestro Corps War, was huge and it's big, but it's just the beginning. And we're going to see different corps and different lanterns rise. And the book actually ends with the establishing of a new corps. So 2 Guardians go off on their own and begin the Blue Lantern Corps. And then you get this cool outro where you're looking at the universe and there are different lights starting to spark because there is something bigger coming. And that's where this sort of volumes leads into volume 2, which is, this big war, this big explosion between the 7 Lantern Corps. And I think that's just a cool way to end things that, there's something big coming. And you can tell that Geoff Johns is working towards this as he's writing. Just some quick things on the art. Again, I'm not really art savvy. I see art and I'm like, this is great. And it is great. Throughout the book, you have a few different illustrators contributing. For the most part, the art is pretty consistent in this sort of realistic art style, which I think really suits the grittiness and the sort of huge scale of the adventures that we're seeing and the warfare. And I also think that helps lend itself to some pretty interesting looking aliens, because of course you get different races and that sort of thing. And I think it works really well to be able to see that in detail. And of course, being able to see the detail of the huge splash pages where you have the green and yellow lanterns fighting. You do get some other art styles in there, few and far between, but it's sort of refreshing to sort of mix it up a little bit. But overall, the art is very consistent. It's more on the realistic side of things. And it's quite good and lends itself to the narrative really well. So those are my thoughts on Green Lantern by Geoff Johns, Volume 1. Really, really solid read. It's not inaccessible, although I would say that you need to be familiar with the tropes of comics. And what I mean by that is sort of being able to pick up on the clues of what's happened off panel, what's happened in another book, and what's happened, and what's going on historically. And those are, I realize as I'm reading these books, it's not things that everybody's used to. So a good rule for reading comics, and it's also a good rule for life, just keep plowing on, do your best. If something doesn't make sense, keep reading, because usually it's explained coming up, and if it's not, just try and fit it in the broken jigsaw puzzle where you can. Not everything that's mentioned is important anyway. As long as you can see the basic shape of what's unfolding, I think you can appreciate it. That being said, having recently just read and talked about this, I'm very excited to dive into Volume 2 and what might be my biggest omnibus on the shelves behind me. So that's exciting. Here's a sneak peek at what we're going to look at in a couple weeks' time. It's exciting, I know. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like. If you have any questions or anything to say, leave a comment. If you want to see more, please do subscribe. But that's all for now. And until next time, thanks for watching.